What's up, guys? We're going to be reading The Search for the Red Dragon. Nothing wrong with reading different books, you know? Nothing wrong with that. Understanding others' authors' opinion and what other authors are meaning. So we're going to start with at the bottom right here because I was on YouTube and accidentally filmed me reading for a minute. It was decided that they would have to take John's car into the city to take the train, especially from the Oxford station, would risk the three of them being seen on non-university business and would endanger too many questions that they'd have to make up answers for. And that was before any queries about their keeping company with a small winged girl with a penchant for yammering on about something called the archipelago. John went to make some adjustments into the engine, followed by a very inquisitive Laura Glue, while Jack and Charles made apologies to Warney about having to leave. Warney himself had already decided that this was a business he'd rather have no part in, and so nodded in agreement when they presented their plan to go into the city to locate the girl's family. "I call navigation," said Jack, as they walked out to the car. "What does that mean?" asked Charles. "It means I get the front passenger seat and Jack, and you have to sit in the back with Laura Glue." "What?" squattered Charles. "That's not fair. I came in with John. I get the passenger seat." "What are you two arguing about?" John said, wiping his hands on an oilcloth. "The car is ready to load if you haven't something more pressing to sell." Ugh. "A little tired today." "We're arguing about the seating arrangement," Charles told him. "I wanted to sit in front, but I called navigation," said Jack. "Well, there you have it," stated John. "Can't be helped if he called navigation. Sorry, Charles," muttered Charles. It was fortunate that Laura Glue's wings were artificial because they would not have fit in the small cab of the car and still allowed room for any other passengers. It was difficult enough to get them into the boot, and then only with some amount of judicious folding and positioning. Laura Glue was twisting her hair into the knots with nervous concern for her wings until John pointed out that he was putting the Geoffrica in the boat, as well so she could be assured it was a safe place for them to be. Wings and Atlas secured, Charles and Laura Glue bundled into the cramped back seat, and John and Jack climbed into the front. "Okay," said Laura Glue, pointing at the threadbare seat covers. "There's an invisible line down the middle. This side is for girls and that side is for boys, and you aren't allowed to cross the line." "It's a little close in here for boundaries," Charles noted. "What happens if I cross the line?" Laura Glue scowled. "I have to cut out your heart and feed it to the fairies." Charles stared wide-eyed and speechless before the girl's face split into a broad grin to indicate that she was teasing him. "You're not exactly a normal little girl, are you?" asked Charles. "You have a funny-looking mouth," said Laura Glue. "This is going to be a very long ride," said Charles. It was actually a shorter ride than they expected, as the weather was good and there were few other vehicles on the road. Traffic became more congested once they arrived in London proper, but Charles' familiarity with the city streets aided with their navigation considerably. "Ironic, isn't it?" remarked Jack. "Oh, shut up," Charles said crossly. "Turn left up here, John, then park as close as you can to the house. The shorter the distance we have to walk in public with Laura Glue, the better." "Hey," the girl said, Why don't you want to walk with me?" Because Charles told her with a teasing smile, "We've decided we like you, and we don't want some shady fellow swooping in when we aren't looking to carry you off." Instead of the laugh or sarcastic retort he was expecting, Laura Glue's eyes grew wide with fear, and she seemed to shrink back into the recess of the seat. "Don't," she whispered in a fragile, frightened voice. "Don't ever tease. Not about that." Charles hesitated, but Jack saw the hook on the girl's face and reached out a hand to her. "Don't worry," he said reassuringly. "You're with all three caretakers. And do you know we're not just caretakers of a musty old atlas? We're also caretakers of everything else there is in the entire archipelago of dreams. Even little girls named Laura Glue, and as long as you're with us, no one will ever harm you. Laura Glue blinked back a tear, then took Jack's hand and smiled. Okay, she said, but I still want to find Jamie just the same. It was the twilight hour when they finally trooped up the steps and arranged the bell at the place Charles directed them to. The stately, well situated townhouse was brightly lit within the butt. There was no answer to the bell, or to their repeated knocks on the stout maho- maho- mahogany door. Now what? John wondered. He must be out for the evening. Do we wait for him, or is there another place to look? There may be, said Charles. Kensington Gardens is just down the way. Perhaps he's inclined to take evening walks there. It's certainly worth a stroll, Jack said. Now that we've come. This far, I'm just happy to have had reasons to leave the Kilns. Both John and Charles had noted the drastic change in Jack's countenance since the unusual apparition, apparition had crash landed in his garden. He looked fully engaged once more, as if the girl were a fulcrum that had levered him out of his melancholy, 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 and as such, neither one of them was inclined to mention their shared dreams again until it seemed necessary to do so. The mystery at hand was more than enough to consume the evening anyway. The gardens were indeed just a short distance away, and the lights of the city were just beginning to twinkle in the fading cobalt light of dusk. When they arrived, it's a good sized park, said John. Where should we begin looking? Where else? Charles replied. The statue. Of course, said Jack, slapping his forehead. That statue. It was erected for May morning, was it not? I could be drummed out, Magdalen, for forgetting that. Or worse, said Charles. They'd make you take up residence at Cambridge, set just along the walking paths. The tall bronze statue of Sir James Barry's most famous creation towered over passersby who strode along at a leisurely pace, hardly pausing to glance at the sculpture except for one. The small, slight man was barely 5 feet tall, with a mustache and fringes of white hair that struck out around the edges of his top hat. He stood holding a cane in one hand and a leash attached to an enormous Saint Bernard in the other. He looked at the statue with an expression that might have been construed as fondness or longing, if it were not also for the immense sadness that seemed to lie underneath. Charles, deciding that this was no time for furtiveness, called out to the man from some 20 yards away, I say, are you James Barry? Might we have a word? The man's eyes widened in surprise as he saw a cluster of people eagerly rushing toward him, and he quickly pulled down his hat, turned down his collar, and began walking briskly in the opposite direction, dragging the reluctant dog behind him. Did he hear me? Charles said, puzzled. Oh, he heard you, Jack said wearily. You have all the stealth of a wet badger. In some places that's a compliment, retorted Charles. Do shut do shut up, you two, John scolded. He quickened his pace after the swiftly receding forms of Barry and the Saint Bernard. Wait, John shouted after him. We only want to speak with you. It's no use, said Charles. We frightened him off. Laura Glue planted both her feet and flung out her arms. Jamie, she shouted. Jamie, please don't go. And abruptly, the man stopped in his tracks. Slowly, he turned around and looked at them. And then, just as slowly, he walked back toward the four companions, his cane tapping gently on the cobblestones and the dog trailing obediently behind. Several feet away, he stopped and considered them one by one, before finally looking down at Laura Glue. It's been a very, very long time since anyone has called me Jamie, he said slowly, and it's not something I allow many people. So meeting somebody new in this chapter is different because now we have to understand who Jamie is. To do so, you must tell me who you are and why you call me by that name. The little girl's eyes began to well up. Don't you remember me the last time we met? You gave me a kiss. She showed him the thimble, and he knelt down in front of her. My dear, I am an old man, and in all my years, many, many children have seen that play, and they know that a thimble is a kiss, and a kiss thimble. And please forgive my aged memory, but I can't have been the one who gave this to you, because I haven't done that sort of thing since long before you were born. But, she stammered, confused, you must be Jamie, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. What wouldn't have worked, my dear? This, said Lord Blue, pulling the compass rose out of her tunic in the presence of four caretakers. It shone as brightly as a beacon. This expression on Jamie's face changed rapidly from surprise to disbelief to strangely gratitude. Put that away, he said gently, and let me see your kiss again. Lord Blue tucked the parchment flower back in a pocket and handed him the thimble. Hern, he rumbled as he examined the kiss. I see it now. I'm sorry I didn't recognize it before. I wasn't expecting anyone like you in Kensington Gardens. Not again, anyway. He put his arm around the girl and drew her close. Do you know this kiss is one of the only items ever removed from the treasure trove of the great dragon Samarin? For really and truly, said Lord Blue. Yes, Barry replied, winking at John as he spoke. It was acquired in an adventure of great peril, and my best friend and I barely escaped with our lives. Whatever else has gone on, John whispered to Charles. It's obvious why he was chosen as a caretaker. Yes, said Charles, nodding. Laura Glue clapped her hands. I know that story. I know it. That was before you got old again and became his enemy. A pained expression flashed over Jamie's face before he smiled and kissed Laura Glue on the forehead. It was the best of my failures, my dear girl, now who's for some leprechaun crackers in front of a fire. The sun has set. It's obvious the fairies are going to be about in Kensington Gardens tonight. Chapter 3. Come to his word. Back at Jamie's home, he had an ample supply of leprechaun crackers, as well as an assortment of other biscuits, teas, jams, jellies, and chocolate. I find it useful to be prepared, Jamie said, as he settled into an overstuffed chair with a cup of tea for even the most unexpected of visitors, particularly the useful ones. Stiff wonderful mumbled Laura Glue through a mouthful of crackers and chocolate. Thank you, you're quite welcome, my dear, he said as he placed a saucer of cream and crackers on the floor for the great Saint Bernard, who was lounged comfortably before the fire. Aramis liked treats as well, but that's more often than not just an excuse to indulge in a nibble myself. And now, Jamie continued, turning to the three men, can you tell me what's brought three gentlemen and a child of the Apalago to Kensington Gardens? Just to have tea with an old playwright? When they had finished eating to everyone's satisfaction. Laura Glue repeated the message she had been sent to deliver, and her mission accomplished, promptly busied herself with grooming the dog while the caretakers talked. It took more than an hour. For John, Jack, and Charles to recount the events that had brought them together years earlier as the new caretakers, during which time Laura Glue fell fast asleep on the cushions in one of the townhouse's deep bay windows. They continued with a brief accounting of the war. The Winter King concluded with the afternoon's events and the sudden appearance of the girls with wings. When they had finished, Jamie stared into the fire, considering for several minutes. I was terribly sorry about Stellan, he finally said. I read about his death in the papers, of course, but it never crossed my mind that it had been the work of the Winter King. And the next couple of years, as the war wound down, I suspected that Bert and Jules had taken some sort of action with regard to the Apalago, but I tried to put it out of my mind when I left. I vowed to be done with it, and for better or worse, I've kept the vow until tonight, that is. You were Arthur Conan Doyle's replacement, weren't you? Charles asked. In a manner of speaking, said Jamie. There have always been three caretakers, more or less, although once called to the task, those who previously served as caretakers never seemed to be completely removed from the responsibilities it entails. As you may have noticed, he said, smiling broadly, before Jules Verne believed it was three Americans who answered the call. Then Jules, then Bert, who was to become the new caretaker Principia. Harry, Houdini, and Doyle were recruited at the same time by Jules, he said. But they both had the same problem. Neither of them wished to keep the secrets of the Archipelago. Houdini, in fact, wished to expose them to the world, and did his best to do so. Woo! Charles whistled. They can't have gone over well with Bert. Bert was the least of their worries, said Jamie. At one point, it had gotten so bad that Cimarron himself had come to England looking for both Houdini and Doyle, and it wasn't just to take back to Geoffrica. He'd heard about the business with the photographs and the fairies, which had been brought over on the Green Dragon. Incidentally, he planned to end their tenure definitively. A shudder passed through John as he recalled watching Cimarron do that very thing in the final battle with the Winter King, when Cimarron was holding him in the claw high above the waterfall at the edge of the world. And after every chance for redemption was given, the evil man still struck out at the great dragon, who subsequently dropped him. John could imagine what it must have taken for Cimarron to go looking for vengeance. It's never been confirmed for me by Jules or Bert. Jamie continued, and the author certainly wouldn't speak of it. But some mishap between Doyle and Houdini is what resulted in the Winter King's knowledge of the Geographica. Geographica. You've got to be joking, exclaimed Charles. How irresponsible can one be? Up until that time, there were objects other than the Geographica that had been entrusted to the caretakers, said Jamie. And whatever those items were, the Winter King took them and used them to facilitate the construction of a new dragon ship, the Black Dragon. Jack said with a shudder, I know it better than I'd have liked to. You know what? Yeah, we're gonna stop there for tonight. We're gonna stop there for tonight. And so I want to stop there tonight. Hope you guys enjoy, and peace. Subscribe.